Hello, friends, and welcome to I Know I Belong When, an innovation, unbiased production where bold voices, curious stories, and authentic impact amplify knowing you're invited, seen, heard, and needed. I am your host, Christopher Bylone, Principal Strategist at Innovation Unbiased. This is more than a conversation. It is a movement, a mirror, a megaphone, one where raw truth meets radical hope. Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is a culture architect and trusted advisor to the C-suite, an international keynote speaker who helps leaders stop managing people by hope and hustle and start building cultures of performance and accountability. Please welcome Deni Ferrell, CEO of and founder of Culture Refinery. She has partnered with Fortune 100 companies, scrappy startups, and mission-driven nonprofits. She is obsessed with turning individual potential into collective performance. Translation, she optimizes the ROI on the most critical investment any organization makes, their talent, by developing confident managers, strengths-based teams, and deeply engaged employees. She believes culture should be designed, not defaulted, operationalized every day, not relegated to slogans and slide decks. If you have heard the phrase culture by design, not by default, today you meet the strategist who lives it. She is also a certified Gallup Strengths coach who helps leaders unlock the genius already sitting on their teams, turning friction into flow and misalignment into momentum. So as we do on this show, we are going to ground our conversation in the belonging formula, where belonging equals equity plus diversity times inclusion to the power of accessibility. Let us explore how Deni makes that formula solvable so belonging stops being a poster on a wall and becomes a practice you do not just feel, you measure. Let's build something that works and lasts. Deni, welcome to I Know I Belong When.
Oh my goodness, what an intro. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
You are very, very welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being a guest on the show. It's a pleasure of mine. So let's get into this conversation. When an organization calls you to optimize their return on talent, what is the first signal you are scanning for at the manager level that really accelerates culture or stalls it?
You know, when I first engage, I am listening. I'm listening for not just dysfunction, but I'm listening for how those leaders are responding to the friction, to the failures, or even if there is freedom for the failures to happen. Because we know that high-performing cultures aren't conflict-free, right? You have to have some healthy conflict, and the true measure of leadership in that situation is your ability to repair, your ability to translate that into learning, into growth for you, the organization, and your team. And so that's what I'm listening for. Of course, there are the standard, right? We're looking at engagement and turnover and manager effectiveness and all of those things. But once you get aside from those metrics, those standard HR data points, I want to listen. I want to listen to what those leaders are saying, what their peers are saying, what their teams are saying. I want to sit in the back of the room and experience when people speak up versus when they don't speak up. Who's the first to talk? What's the conversation look like? Because when managers lack trust, when they lack clarity, when they lack courage, that's where culture starts to stall. And that's where we are able, if we can solve for that, that's where we're able to bring solid strategy into the market.
When I think about what you were just saying is trust is so important. And it's something that we're really lacking at the moment, not just within corporations, but just within society writ large, right? I don't know that we trust each other as much as we used to, and something that we need to really get back. So it's really figuring out how do we rebuild that trust and just build trust from the start. And so making sure that we are identifying who isn't speaking up and pulling them into the conversation so that they know that they belong at the table as well, which is really, really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you were to rewrite the classic leadership mantra to center the middle, what would you say, and how would you redefine how teams look like 6 weeks later?
This is a good one. I guess, are you saying the mantra is to center the middle, or are you asking me to pick a mantra to redefine?
I think, if you're thinking about any leadership mantra that you use that you always rewrite, you're like, you know what? This one just sucks. And we're going
Hmm.
to rewrite it because it doesn't work, right? When you hear leaders say, oh, good to great, or, the 90-second manager, right? Like those leadership mantras, they're classics, but do they really work? And so if there's one that you're really critical of, what is it? And how would
Oh my
you rewrite
goodness.
it?
So we've all heard, both in leadership, even in sports and life, we talk about there's no I in team.
Oh, yes.
Oh, what do you mean? Because I'm an individual, and as leaders, we have to recognize the individuality of every single person. We have to build relationship. Before I can manage a team, I have to manage the individuals and build relationship with the individuals on that team. I have to earn their trust. I have to understand what their strengths are, where their blind spots are, what they're interested in, what they're motivated by, what they're triggered by. If I don't understand
Yeah.
that, I try to apply this sort of cookie cutter spread, then I might hit my metrics, right? I still might
Right.
on paper look like I'm doing good. But when I talk about unleashing genius and optimizing the return on your talent, when you do this peanut butter leadership, you don't get the best. And the thing is, not only do you as a leader and the organization ultimately not get the best, but the individuals sometimes don't even realize that they could be more brilliant. They could bring more to the table because we've not created the space that allows for that. And so I believe that there is an I in team. Actually, there's a whole bunch of I's. I like to think about, if we think about the word team on a digital screen, just consider a whole bunch of little I's as the pixels making up the word team. It's you have to start with the I before you can even get to the team, because I need to know what position you play. How do I play to your strengths? Where are you injured? If we're taking a sports analogy, I need to know those things so that I can effectively engage with you and organize the way we collaborate with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I even think about how, a lot of people joke and say there's no I in team, but there is a me. Right. And I just think about how, like, the reason probably why people were joking about that all along was just been like, hey, you're not recognizing me as an individual and what
Yes.
I bring, right? Yes, we all have to operate collectively and we have to be a team, but there's no way to have a team without the individuals who make it up, right? It's one of also the reasons why the logo of Innovation Unbiased is eyes. Right. That's what makes up the
Mm-hmm.
hand. It's 5 eyes. Right. So that, we're really centering it on the people are the most important thing. I mean, that's why even what we said in your bio, right? The most important piece of investment that an organization is going to make is their talent. And those are all
Yes.
just individuals. And so how are we making sure that they are recognized for the awesomeness that they are? And if there's a rock star, how do we propel them
Yep.
and rocket
Yep.
them forward, right? Is there going to be people who rise up above the rest? And we have to be okay with that and use that as a, hey, everybody, if you want to get to that level, model what they've been doing. They're showing you the way of success. We can't just all be the same, right? There would be no fun.
Yeah, no fun. No fun.
No-
No fun. And we get less out of it, right? That's the whole
yeah,
the whole value of diversity, right? It's that because we have different lived experiences and different perspectives and points of view and strengths and approaches to things, when we come together, the sum of our ideas and our work ends up being greater than the whole. That's the goal, not for us to put our ones together to come to 5, but for all 5 of us to put our ones together and suddenly we have 25.
right. Right. It's that multiplier.
Hmm.
How are we raising it exponentially, right? It's
Yes.
not just addition, but how are we taking those five individual people and not just adding it up to be five, but how are we taking that and getting that to, don't make me do the math right now of what the exponent is, 5 to 5, right? Like, not today, not today.
Not today. Not today. Mm-mm.
Okay, I want to dive us now into the segment that we say names, because
Mm-hmm.
names for me is really important to get something's name right. It's the first stage of creating a culture of belonging. So what is the story behind your name that you would like people to know, so when they carry your name forward in rooms where you're not present, it's represented the way you want it?
You know, so my name is Denitresse, and most folks haven't heard the name. They mispronounce it regularly. I don't take it I take it seriously, but not too seriously. I understand the intent behind it. But when I think back, and I actually talked to my mother earlier today, I was like, make sure I got the story right, Mom. And so here is the story. I was born to a young, scared mother in the South, Black woman, obviously. And as she is in labor, there is a nurse who keeps telling her, "Don't push. We're waiting for the doctor. You have to wait." And of course, you can imagine she is, in pain. It's a traumatic experience. And she has this sort of authority figure telling her, "Don't push. You have to wait for the doctor to show up." And she tells
Mm,
me that in walks an older Black nurse who leans over to her and tells her, "Baby, the next time you feel a contraction, you push. I don't care who is in
mm,
this room. We are not waiting for the doctor. The next time you feel a contraction, you push." And that nurse's name was Demetrius, and my mother's name is Denise. And so that is where we
mm,
got Denitresse. And what stands out to me about that, my mother is one of the fiercest, compassionate, empathetic, giving fighter fighter that I know. Okay, you cannot get anything over on my mother. She is ready for it, but she will also give you the shirt off of her back, the last dollar in her purse. And all
mm,
of those things come together. And I think about that story, the power of self advocacy, but community and support, and
mm.
owning your voice and owning your strength and speaking up for yourself, right? Those were all
Yep.
the things that were happening in the room when I came into the world. And those are the things that truly light me up, right? Speaking up when someone else's voice is not being heard, or making sure that
Right.
I'm speaking up on behalf of myself, if not on behalf of others, leaning into my strengths and leaning into sort of my intuition. I may not feel like I'm the expert, but my gut is telling me that this makes more sense than the direction that I'm being told. So trusting myself even more. And so all of those things are what come up when I think about my name, the story of my name, and what I hope to embody.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly, your name is a combination between your mom and the nurse who said, just go. Like, it's time. Don't listen to this other person. Like, let's
Hmm.
just get this baby into the world
Trust
and
yourself.
introduce them. Trust yourself, right? What a powerful, just just powerful in and of itself. I mean, what a beautiful name to start with, but the story behind it and the recognition of trusting the feelings you're having, what your body is telling you, and also just people advocating for you, right? I mean, that nurse coming in at that moment and saying, "You know what? No, 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 just push," right? Like, let's go. Let's get this baby into the world. Let's get the pain that you're having over. So what a wonderful story, and thank you for sharing that. I do really
Absolutely.
appreciate that. Okay, so can you describe a time when a manager that modeled we say names as a daily practice, and what changed in the team's trust, tempo, performance as they got people's names right?
I was drawing a blank as I was thinking about this question earlier, and I think it's because for me and in my experience, it has been a little less about saying names explicitly, although that is very important, right? Especially in global cultures and global employers, I'm very adamant about, what is your name? And let me practice it, even if it doesn't come naturally. Let me make sure that I'm practicing it so that I can call you by how you want to be called. Don't tell me your name is Anna if it's not, right? Let's really get to the point, unless you're really comfortable with me calling you Anna. But if you are Shu Young, then I would like to call you Shu Young, if that's all right with you, right?
Right.
But it's been more than that to me. It's less about saying my name and more about seeing me. Because I know that
Mm,
if you are intentional about knowing who I am when I walk into the room, hey, Denitresse, hey, Deni, how are you? That you also see me. And when you see me, that creates an opportunity for sponsorship and advocacy beyond just shout outs, right? It it is when you start to put me in positions that allow me to stretch, to grow, to contribute. It goes back to this concept that we have at Culture Refinery. We talk about leadership, inside out leadership, right? In order
mm,
to effectively lead, I have to first be self aware, but then the very next thing, I have to recognize you as an individual. I have to see who you are, the
right.
I. I have to see the I in the team. And I have to build relationship and understanding of what are the things that you are capable of that maybe we're not tapping into it. And I actually love thinking about this a little bit simply because I've had several managers in my career trajectory who have been able to see something that maybe I didn't see, that had nothing to do with the job description, and they sort of created. They created roles and created opportunities for me because they saw me. And sometimes they saw in me things that I did not see in myself that allowed me to stretch and grow. And I have a very disparate and non-traditional career journey, but it is marked by me being an advocate and asking questions that seem off the wall, and also
Hmm.
by folks seeing something in me and saying, well, what about this? I think back to, one leader who very early in my career said, well, you seem to have a knack for problem solving. And I know you're not, you're just out of undergrad, but there's a problem that we have, and I'm going to stand up a Six Sigma project to solve it. I'm the black belt. I know you have no training, but you're going to be my green belt with no training on this Six Sigma project, 3 months after, coming out of undergrad. Or when another leader said, I see you doing this big operational program, operational efficiency project, manufacturing efficiency project, but there's something about your ability to show up when you're not the expert in the functions, and you can corral all of the different experts together to get some things together. And she essentially created a role within her organization for me. And it was a combination of build this from scratch, and this is broken and not working, and right, and all of the things that are sometimes difficult to articulate and put in a job description, but were the things that I was great at, that,
Hmm.
could then allow me to sort of showcase and own that expertise, that brilliance, that genius that I brought to the table, that was very differentiated from, I was in a manufacturing organization. So I wasn't the engineer. I wasn't the marketing expert. I wasn't the person that was working on the line and supervising those employees, but really allowed me to showcase the way that I've add value and the impact that I could have. And so in addition to sort of saying my name, because of course she had to say my name in rooms to even make that happen, but in addition to saying my name, seeing me and
Yes.
moving on my behalf is what really stood out for me.
That's really important. And thank you for elevating the question to a whole nother level. I do really appreciate that about you, and many of the conversations we've had. You've always taken the questions and made them much richer than what were asked. But I think this is also a great segue into talking about your moment of belonging, because when people see you and they sponsor you, it's going beyond just creating belonging in that moment, but how are you knowing that you belong in that culture, in that organization, and you can see yourself long term? So, when you think about your own moment of belonging, what was happening in that moment when the leader recognized your strengths and made room for them? What shifted immediately for you?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so Christopher, I want to just say that I am blessed to feel like I've had multiple of these moments, right? So not a
Mm.
singular one. And I know that that sometimes is not the norm. But as I was reflecting on this question, I was like, wait, I can think about this time and this time and this time. And so the time that I actually want to talk about, I want to go all the way back. I was 16 years old and I was
Mm.
working at Taco Bell. And I was
Okay.
working for the manager, the owner, proprietor of that facility. His name was Bobby Jones. And at 16, I was not old enough to be an official assistant manager. I
Mm.
was not old enough technically to close the store on my own.
Okay.
And yet Bobby saw leadership, he saw accountability, he saw initiative, he saw things in me. At 16, I'm just trying to make a little bit of change, to be honest, and have fun working with my friends. But he saw these things in me and he called it a big dog program. He created this big
Okay.
dog program. It was almost like us little mini assistant managers, right? Where he just gave us a little bit more responsibility than the typical employees. And there were a few situations where I had the opportunity to open and close the store without another
Mm.
manager present, but we had another adult present. But I had the opportunity to open and close the store as sort of this acting manager at
Mm.
16. And for me, whereas many of us have different things that motivate us, and we always talk about being intrinsically motivated, there is something special about external validation, about someone seeing something in you and calling it forward that makes you puff your chest out a little bit more and makes you lean in a little bit more. And having that experience at such a young, right, age for me, such a transformative time was amazing. And so it gave me back my voice to be able to speak up
Mm.
and say, here's where I think I can add value. Here's a question that's really off the wall. So I think about that example. And then I remember when I was working for Deere, I reported to our chief economist, and I was working on all of our public policies and international trade and economic information and understanding how that impacts the corporate strategy and the business strategy for the company. And I remember walking into the chief economist's office, JB Penn at the time, and I said, JB, I have a question. It's off the wall, but who in our company is responsible for social media? And this was 2009, 2010. Companies were just starting to get their feet wet when it came to corporate brands on social media. And
Right.
he was like, I don't know. I think it might be Charlie's group over in branding. Let me send a few emails to introduce you. And the reason why I said, here's why. I said, JB, I've been spending some time in the evenings playing this game online on Facebook. I've been playing this game on Facebook called Farmville. And I get very annoyed as I'm working my farm because the tractors that I can buy in my app are blue and I believe that they should be green. We're missing an opportunity, right? And so that me walking in one morning like, JB, I got a problem. Who do I need to talk to? Because the tractors in my game are blue and not green. Translated to me then being invited to headquarters as we were reviewing presentations for agency partners. And ultimately, I ended up being Deere's very first social media manager, launching their program from the beginning, training, policy, training, everything, and grew it in under a year to over 500,000 followers across all of our platforms. And I say that because it was one, Bobby Jones seeing something and really nurturing that you can speak up, your voice matters, your ideas matter, your insight, your perspective matters, that continue to develop year over year over year, that even gave me the audacity to walk into this C-suite leader's office, right, fresh out of business school, asking the most nonsensical question, right, but still like leaning into it. So that is my story of belonging.
Well, that's great. And somebody who is a fellow John Deere fan.
I love it. I love
So
it.
you name dropped before. So I took the opportunity. I grew up on a farm. right? I agriculture major. I learned how to drive a tractor on a John Deere. When my mom bought her first riding lawnmower and it wasn't a John Deere, I definitely looked at her sideways and went, "What did you do?" And so somebody who's been a John Deere fan for a very long time, what a great story! And thank you for flooding memories back of my childhood. This is really great. And John Deere, if you're listening, hey, come talk. Um, Alrighty. So what great stories of finding your moment of belonging and really like going back and you belonged at 16 and that story has carried with you your entire career. And what a powerful way to help somebody find and ignite the excitement about leadership at such a young age. Though this podcast would not be authentic if we didn't talk about the moment that belonging didn't happen. And so you have said that diversity recruiting without culture is like inviting somebody to swim and dropping them in shark-infested waters. What a great visual. Tell us about the time that you lived that, right? When you were dropped in shark-infested waters, how did you get to shore and what would you have built differently to help maybe prevent you being dropped in those shark-infested waters?
Oh, this is a big one, and I've got a couple of stories that are coming up to mind right now. I want to start by saying that depending on the size of an organization, we talk about culture as if it's a singular thing, right? Or culture is that it's one or culture. But depending on the size of the organization, there are so many smaller subcultures that come together to create the larger or culture. And so when the overarching culture is stated as this, but when you show up to this space, it feels slightly different, or your experience in that space ends up being different than someone else's experience in that space. It starts to cause you to question, right? Do you belong? Or what is it that's different about me in my experience versus someone else? And you have that is it me or is it them type of question. And it's not necessarily the organization, but it's because there are so many different, culture is influenced by every single person in the organization influences that culture. And so I say that to say I remember being in an organization and we were here is the story. Oh, we were preparing for we would have a Christmas party every year for our department. And this year budgets were constrained, and so instead of doing a big dinner at a restaurant with spouses, we were just going to do a lunch in the office catered for just the team. No problem. I'm cautious because actually I'm going to say it because I need to say it. Okay. And so and so as we're planning who we're going to have cater our lunch, the name of a somewhat local restaurant comes up. The restaurant is called the Redneck Barbecue Lab. And no shade or shame to that organization, but the choice in name has negative connotations depending on your background,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And so I brought that up to the rest of the leadership team. It was dismissed. And I didn't fight as hard as I could for it. I brought it up a couple of
Hmm.
times. It continued to be dismissed. The day of the holiday lunch comes up. And in that moment, the previous night, I was restless. I couldn't sleep well. My spirit was unsettled. And in that moment, I get to the office and I call every single African American, person of African descent within our department. I pull them into a meeting. And I say, hey, y'all, I feel like I have let us down and
Mm.
I apologize. And here are some options. Which feels like it makes the most sense for us to move forward? How do you want me to move on our behalf going forward?
Mm.
And the saddest part was their response. Their response was Deni, this isn't worth you extending any political capital for. Deni, we expect
Mm,
this. We know how things are here. Deni, it's okay. Don't worry about it. One of my employees said, I have a free chicken sandwich coupon. I was just going to go use it. So I wish I had two. I would give you one. Right. And so it
mm,
was this is what we're accustomed to that just like hurt my heart even deeper than the outrage that
yes.
I had. And then what took it to the next level, because now, I'm still speaking about it. And so I'm having some conversations. Let's think about this from a policy perspective. Here's the negative connotation that some groups experience with this name, right? Should there be we're working in supply chain, should there be some guidance around
Right.
who we allow into the facilities, right? They should have some sort of standard, whatever. And it went all the way up and came back down. And some leaders who inside conversations had also expressed that they did not care for the name and had the same sort of instinct about the name as I did suddenly came back with, I didn't see it was a problem. I don't think it's a big deal. And, I think one manager said, well, when I think about the term, I just think it means knuckleheads. And I said, well, it's great for you to have the privilege to consider that term means knuckleheads to you, right? And so that was probably the final straw for me in terms of this place doesn't completely see me. And even
Mm,
when I'm speaking up loud enough for you to hear me, it wasn't respected. It wasn't my lived experience. And
right.
that of
Right.
others just like me, my lived experience wasn't validated. Someone said, "Oh, well, I've been there before and Black people eat there." Okay.
Well, that's nice. It's nice that
Okay.
you have a Black friend. Um,
Okay.
right. But I think it reminds me of the microaggressions,
Mhm.
that are faced every day. I could remember entering an organization and I was working with our Black ERG, and the executive sponsor was a white guy. And it was one of the first Black ERG meeting that I attended when I entered this organization. The microaggressions that were coming out of his mouth in the ERG meeting was making me uncomfortable. And afterwards, I went to the leaders and went, what is going on? And they were so accustomed to this happening to them, they didn't even see it. They're like, what are you talking about? And it took me a little bit of time to explain to them, like, what he is saying is a microaggression. And you do not need to accept this behavior. And then it turned from oh, we didn't see it as a microaggression to, yeah, we do see it as a microaggression, but we didn't know we could challenge it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Nobody gave us the platform to challenge it. And I went, well, guess what? I am now. New day, but to me, it was just like they were invisible.
Mhm.
And so it's taking leaders to say, no, this is not the status quo. We're going to challenge the system. We're actually going to make some changes. We're going to make sure that we are inclusive 100% of the time. And sorry, business, if that was the name of your company, but you maybe should have thought about how to make a name that isn't triggering. Their name is what it is, but it provides some negative connotations. And so how do we make sure that we're not causing harm
Mhm.
just by the type of food that we're trying to provide for a holiday
Mhm.
dinner?
Mhm. Yes. And I
So
say that it's still a great company. There's I'm not it's no shade to the organization overall, but in that moment, I
you
didn't
just you
belong.
just weren't seen. You weren't
I didn't
seen.
belong.
And
Mhm.
you knew you didn't belong there because people told you your opinion, your professional judgment was not valid. Well, okay, so let's bring this back to a more positive note. We got to talk about the bad, but we also want to make sure we still talk about the good. So, and we want to give leaders some solid takeaways, right, on how they can
Yes.
actually sustain belonging in their organization. So, walk us through your align, listen, respond, act approach. And if you could give one tactical example at each stage that sustains change when the spotlight moves on.
Yeah, yeah. When we talk about align, right? I think it's so important to name a thing, right? You talk about saying a name. Name what success actually looks like in this moment, in this season. And I think that's really important,
Mm,
especially for middle managers who are often being inundated with so many different directives, right? There's 5 different strategic priorities right now that are coming from corporate, but your function also has these other 3 priorities, and but right, so you have all of these things coming in, and at some point you have to get quiet and say, in this moment, considering all of those things, what's most critical, and let's put a name on it. What success actually look like in this season? Because it's too easy to get distracted. And then when we talk about listen, right? We're scanning for patterns in stories. I'm not looking for you to tell me the answer to the problem. I'm looking for who speaks up and who's quiet. I'm looking for how often are certain people speaking versus the others, right? Really the patterns, the themes that are coming up there and what's not being said. And then in respond, it really is about, I always talk about feedback, especially right when we're addressing challenges and friction, and how feedback is both positive and constructive. And the reason why it's so hard is because we're doing it wrong and we're not considering it as a two-way conversation. But there's art and science around effectively giving feedback, both positively and constructively, but doing it in a way that honors the intent, right? The success of it, the intent of feedback is to inform, influence future behavior. And so
mm,
then pure praise or pure critique is not technically feedback
right,
because it doesn't do enough. It's not robust enough to tell me what to do again, right? And so being
right.
really clear about how do we respond when things happen? How do we address friction directly? And a lot of times we talk about doing it quickly, and sometimes I believe in that. Sometimes you actually do need to let it rest for a second and get your thoughts
Right.
together and give that person time to sort of get it together. But really, even if it's positive, whatever you're hearing, what do you do with it, right? We've all
Right.
been in listening sessions, we've done the surveys and all the things, and nothing happens, nothing changes. And at some point
Right.
you get disgruntled, and don't ask me again if you're not going to do anything about it, right? And
Right.
so you you fall into that. So actually respond, be transparent, especially in the middle. A lot of times you're facing pressures from both sides. And there are some things that you can't be 100% transparent about. You can't tell your team everything that's going on. But there are still things you can say. You can say, I don't know, but here's what I do know. Or here's when I find this out, here's how I'm going to tell you. Here's what I'm anticipating, right? You can give some guidance there. So you can say, I'm stressed out about this transition too. You can be a little vulnerable there, but respond so people don't feel like they're in it by themselves. And then
Right.
act, right? When it comes to acting, it's actually, doing something that moves the needle, doing something visibly, like, we pointed out this issue, here's what I can do. Walk it like you talk it, live the thing that you're talking about. Because small moves, even, little steps can start to build more trust, can start to build greater engagement, right? More confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, folks, if you're going to ask a question on an employee engagement survey and you're not willing to take action on the results, then why are you asking the question? When you put that question on there, be willing to get a negative response that you're going to have to take action on.
Mhm.
And if you're not willing to take action on a negative response, don't ask the question
Don't
to
ask the
begin with.
question. Don't I
Right.
rem I had, we don't do a significant amount of sort of culture consulting. Usually it's tied into learning and development, but we do some of it. And in one engagement, we started with an audit, and we were going to survey and ask these questions within the organization. I remember a leader coming back and saying, I want to scratch these questions because if we ask them, not only do I think it's bringing up past sort of harm that we as an organization have come through, but we're not in the position to do anything differently. And in the moment,
Mm,
I was like, oh man, like, I thought we were committed to this work and, all the things in those early days of this consultancy. I was a little disappointed that we couldn't get to the data so that we can go solve the problem. But in hindsight, as we mature, it could have done more damage to pull it up
Right.
and not address it than it would have been to sort of know what's under the surface and let us get some of these things that we know we can address done first, and then we can come back to that conversation later.
Right. Right. And maturity of that leader recognizing that they couldn't ask that question.
Mhm. Mhm.
They were at least were on the pulse. Maybe it wasn't the best, oh, that doesn't feel good, but at least they were like, we're at least being honest about what we can handle in the moment. So kudos to them, even though it might not be the response or the action they wanted to take, but at least
Yep.
it was an honest one, right?
Yep.
So, okay, so we are coming to the end of our conversation, or at least this recorded conversation, friend. So I am asking everybody to finish the phrase, I know I belong when. So, Deni, finish the sentence. I know I belong when.
I know I belong when I can be my boldest, most authentic, and audacious self. When
Mm,
I am trusted, my voice is welcomed, and my impact is visible, where I don't have to fight for every gain, but I
mm.
am able to really operate in my genius, really operate in my brilliance. And I am seen and can see the folks that I'm supporting.
It's really powerful to be seen and to be able to see others around me. Oh, what a way to know that you truly, truly belong. So, Deni, this has been an absolute pleasure and a great reminder that belonging is not a destination. It is a practice, and it starts with listening. So, friends, if this episode challenged you to move outside your comfort zone, please follow our show, give us that 5-star review you want to give, and add a comment about what you will do to champion belonging today. These actions will help to amplify the message to others, and we want to hear from you. Finish the sentence, I know I belong when, and send us a voice note. Your story could open a future episode. Thank you for listening, and know that your bold, authentic self is welcomed, valued, and loved. And until next time, remember, you belong here.